This is Voyager, and welcome to our ICW adventure. The day's route would take us 62 miles from Port Royal Naval Hospital to the Stono River, just south of Charleston. We would experience stiff winds, piloting challenges, and join up with a couple of impromptu buddy boats. We were up uncharacteristically early and treated to a lovely sunrise. However, it wasn't long before we lost the benefit of our early departure, as the opening of Ladies Island Bridge at Beaufort wasn't until 9 a.m. So while we waited, we looked over at another quaint town we'd have to pass by. Settled in 1717, it is the second oldest city in South Carolina behind Charleston. It is renowned for its preservation of antebellum architecture and has won many top awards, such as Best Small Southern Town by Southern Living. After a bit of treading water off Beaufort, and finally getting our bridge opening, we proceeded on with favorable tidal currents up the Brunswick to Brickyard Creek and into the Coosaw River. Shortly after Beaufort, we passed the Marine Air Station and were treated to some flybys. Here, for a short way, we got into a little bit of a motor sail race with another sailboat called Polaris. The Coosaw River is a decent-sized body of water and eventually becomes St. Helena Sound before opening to the Atlantic. However, to continue on the protected waters of the ICW, we had to turn into the very tight Ashpoo-Coosaw Cutoff, which is a winding channel cutting across Ash Island and Hutchinson Island before joining the South Edisto River. We followed the South Edisto upstream with fairly stiff winds that were averaging around 20 knots. As we reached the tight corner into Watts Cut, we passed a grounded trawler whose crew was scrambling rather frantically to free her. We called to see if we could assist, but they assured us they were okay. Another yacht, Willet, was coming up behind us, and as we both turned into the cut, the trawler seemed to break free. Entering Watts Cut, we discovered it was a very narrow passage. We resolved ourselves to pay close attention to Bob's tracks as we made our way into the Dwahoo River. Polaris was still with us, and they encountered some skinny water and were clearly well outside the recommended path. Willet, meanwhile, had moved on ahead, and we were happy to play follow the leader. The winds continued to be strong and gusty as we made our way on the Wadmalaw River and pushed past John's Island Oxbow anchorage. It was tight and smoky due to campfires, so we opted instead to find a spot on the Stono River just south of Charleston at mile marker 477. We had to carefully select our anchoring spot due to some underwater cables and an old ferry landing, but we settled in for a good night's sleep. And while we weren't able to stop to see Charleston, we were looking forward to seeing the city from the water for the first time. We were planning a push for Georgetown this day, which is a very popular stop on the ICW. We would pass Charleston early on and enjoy a very direct and straight course for most of the day. Our 8:30 departure was timed for the Wapoo Creek Bascule Bridge opening at the bottom of each hour. As you'll see in just a moment, Wapoo Creek is a tight cut with no room to stack up boats, so timing is important. A loose starter wire delayed our departure, and we simply couldn't run hard enough to make the 9:30 opening. So we had a lot of downtime just idling back and forth outside the opening to the cut. It was a perfect time for Amy to start another full day of telework. Finally, our time arrived, and we entered the cut for the opening. On the other side, a memorable view of historic Charleston unfolded before us. Like many iconic stops along our way, we simply didn't have time to visit most. We were on a telework-powered yacht delivery schedule, not a leisurely paced vacation or retirement adventure. However, we'd stopped at Charleston by car before and knew we'd be back in the near future. Charleston was founded in 1670 and has a rich history spanning the colonial period, American Revolution, Civil War, to the present contemporary period. It is world-renowned for its history, architecture, arts, culture, and burgeoning food scene. We crossed the busy Charleston Harbor, which is often dominated by enormous cargo ships, but on this day, the only maritime traffic were the boats of the Melgus 24 Gold Cup Regatta. Ahead was historic Fort Sumter, where the opening shots of the Civil War were fired. It was a thrill to see and impossible to miss. Moving back into the tighter channel that characterizes most of this leg, we left the thrill and excitement of one of the best vistas we'd had on the entire trip. However, we still had many miles ahead of us before leaving the ICW behind for the waters of Chesapeake Bay. As you can probably imagine from these long, straight segments, our autopilot was a true third hand. There was some wonderful wildlife to spy, and you really got a taste of life in the low country. I've always had enormous respect for those who carve out an existence on the water, and a lot of these folks were pretty clear about their politics. Here's just a few of the pictures we took along the way. As the day slowly drew to a close, we were passing more beautiful marshland to starboard, and just beyond was the Atlantic. The popular beach town of Myrtle Beach was just ahead, and we looked forward to seeing familiar places like Morehead City from a completely different perspective. The trip was becoming easier, and we'd settled into a routine that gave us confidence and comfort. We were learning to handle the boat problems that confronted us, and were able to perhaps more completely enjoy the journey we were on. As sunset approached, we had another good day of putting miles under our keels. We hadn't been able to make Georgetown like we wanted to, but we found a beautiful and wild anchorage on the South Santee River. Yet another incredible sunset to close out the day.